Did you know the First World War was ignited by a single bullet? A single shot that echoed across the globe, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to the Great War, World War I. This is the story of the spark that ignited it all. The early 20th century was a time of simmering tensions and political maneuverings. The heart of Europe was a tangled web of alliances, rivalries, and nationalistic fervor. But it was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary that turned these smoldering tensions into a full-blown war. Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was not just a figurehead. He was a symbol of the empire's power, its ambitions, and its place in the world. His death was more than just a personal tragedy. It was a political calamity that would have far-reaching consequences. On that fateful day in June 1914, the Archduke and his wife Sophie were visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. A group of Serbian nationalists had plotted to assassinate the Archduke. They saw him as a symbol of Austro-Hungarian oppression, and his death, they believed, would be a blow to the empire's hold on the region. As the royal couple traveled through the city in an open car, one of the conspirators stepped forward and fired a shot. The bullet struck the Archduke and his wife, ending their lives and setting the world on a path towards war. This single event marked the beginning of the end of an era. The assassination sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, blamed Serbia for the Archduke's death. The empire issued an ultimatum, one that Serbia could not accept without losing its sovereignty. When Serbia rejected the ultimatum, Austria-Hungary declared war. This single event set the world on a path to war, but the groundwork had already been laid. The alliances, the rivalries, and the nationalistic fervor that had been simmering beneath the surface of European politics were about to erupt into the most devastating war the world had yet seen. And it all started with a single bullet. The assassination was just the spark, but the powder keg was already in place. Picture early 20th century Europe, a bustling continent teeming with imperialist tendencies and conflicting interests. As the monarchies sought to expand their territories beyond local borders, the concept of imperialism became a moral justification. The Berlin Conference emerged in the 18th century as a formal agreement among European powers to prevent inevitable competition during their colonial expansion in Africa. It was a gentlemanly way to reduce overseas aggression, particularly between Great Britain and France. However, it didn't alleviate the simmering tension among these European nations, who felt that nothing was preventing home country aggression. Thus, alliances were formed. Enter the Balkan powder keg, often described as the catalyst that led to the First World War. The Balkan states, comprising ethnically related nations such as Greece, Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Romania, and Albania, were once under the Ottoman Empire. As the empire declined, nationalist movements within these states began clamoring for independence. This led to wars between the Ottoman Empire and these nations, eventually resulting in a victory for the Balkan states and a significant reduction in Ottoman influence in Europe. This victory, however, gave rise to overlapping territorial claims and spheres of influence among the major European powers. The annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina by the Austria-Hungary Empire was a particular point of conflict, as the Balkan states considered Bosnia a member. Within this already tense atmosphere, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary further fueled the fire. His visit to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, in June 1914 was foreseen by many as potentially catastrophic. His route was pre-announced, making it easy for would-be assassins, a group of Serbian nationalists, to plan ahead. Although the initial assassination attempt failed, it intensified the simmering tensions among the powers. The stage was set, and all it needed was a spark to ignite the Great War. With the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the world plunged into war. A single bullet fired by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, had set the dominoes into motion. Austria-Hungary, in retaliation, declared war on Serbia, pulling the trigger that would ignite the world into a full-scale conflict. However, this was not a simple case of one nation against another. The intricate web of alliances and treaties that had been weaved throughout the years now came into play. Russia, bound by a pact to protect the Slavic nations, was quick to mobilize its forces in defense of Serbia. This in turn alarmed Germany, an ally of Austria-Hungary. Fearful of the Russian threat, Germany declared war on Russia and subsequently on France, Russia's ally. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, the United Kingdom watched these events unfold with growing concern. When Germany violated Belgium's neutrality to outflank the French army, a blatant disregard for the Treaty of London, Britain had no choice but to enter the fray, declaring war on Germany. With the declarations of war, the machinery of conflict roared to life. Men were called to arms, leaving their homes and families to don uniforms and take up rifles. Trains loaded with soldiers rumbled towards the front lines. Ships carrying troops cut through the waters, their decks crowded with young faces, some filled with anticipation, others with apprehension. The world watched as borders bristled with artillery, skies darkened with aircraft, and seas churned with battleships. The great powers of the world were now locked in a deadly dance, their destinies intertwined in the theater of war. The stage was set for one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. The tension that had been building for years now broke free, its destructive force ripping through the fabric of civilization. The echoes of that gunshot in Sarajevo resonated across the globe, reaching every corner, every person, every heart. World War I had begun, and it would be a conflict unlike any the world had seen before. The war front was a gruesome testament to the horrors of war. It was a stage where the curtain of civilization was pulled back, and the grim reality of human capacity for destruction was laid bare. Trench warfare, a defining feature of World War I, was an experience that conjured up images of mud, rats, barbed wire, and the stench of death. In this vast network of ditches, men lived, fought, and died. The trenches, often dug deep into the earth, provided a modicum of protection from the deadly hail of bullets and artillery shells. Yet they also served as a prison of sorts, confining soldiers to a world of squalor and constant danger. The conditions were appalling. Wet, cold, and infested with vermin, the trenches were a breeding ground for diseases. The human cost was staggering. Men were not only fighting the enemy, but also battling against the elements and the lurking specter of illness. The Great War also ushered in a new era of warfare technology. Machine guns, tanks, airplanes, and poison gas were introduced, increasing the lethality of the conflict. The machine gun in particular was a game changer. With the ability to fire hundreds of rounds per minute, it decimated the ranks of those brave or foolhardy enough to venture into no man's land. The tank, a hulking beast of metal, was designed to traverse the treacherous terrain, shrugging off barbed wire and withstanding bullets. Airplanes took the fight to the skies, while poison gas introduced a terrifying and unseen threat. These new technologies made the war front an even more hazardous place, amplifying the scale of devastation. As we delve into the grim realities of the war front, it's crucial to remember the human aspect. Behind every gun, every tank, and every pair of boots in the mud was a person. A person who laughed, cried, loved, and feared. The war front was a grim reminder of the cost of conflict, but the end was not yet in sight. After 4 long years of conflict, World War I finally came to an end. The year was 1918. The guns fell silent and the world took a collective breath, releasing it in a sigh of relief, but also one of grief for the millions lost. The armistice was signed on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, marking a ceasefire on the Western Front. But the official end wouldn't come until the following year with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, however, was not a promise of lasting peace, but rather a punitive document, placing the blame squarely on Germany and Austria-Hungary, demanding hefty reparations that would devastate their economies for years to come. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the world was left scarred and dramatically altered. Empires crumbled, new nations emerged, and the map of Europe was redrawn. The Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were no more, replaced by new states born out of the ashes of war. But the end of the war didn't mean the end of suffering. The Spanish flu pandemic swept across the globe in 1918 and 1919, killing an estimated 50 million people. More than the war itself, populations were devastated, economies were shattered, and societies were left reeling. In the decades that followed, the world struggled to come to terms with the aftermath of the war. The lost generation of writers and artists reflected the disillusionment and cynicism felt by many. The seeds of resentment sown by the Treaty of Versailles would, before long, sprout into the thorny bush of World War II. Yet, amidst the devastation, there was also hope. The League of Nations was established in an attempt to maintain world peace, a precursor to today's United Nations. It was a glimmer of optimism in a world that had seen too much darkness. World War I left a lasting impact on the world, and its legacy can still be felt today. It was a war that changed everything, a war that was supposed to end all wars. Yet, as history would show, it was just the beginning.